Night Radio's Callaloo presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Night Radio, first aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. Catch us on the World Wide Web, www.nightradio.info. And more lately, you can catch us on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 31st day of August 2024. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. We begin this week's program with the news that a Caribbean giant, Trinidad Sonny Ramphal, has died. He died at the age of 95. You know, it is said that he was a towering figure in international diplomacy. He was a cherished elder statesman of the Caribbean and of the Commonwealth. In the family statement, they said that his distinguished career saw him engage in major roles. During the period of the West Indies Federation, 1958 to 1962, Ramphal was Assistant Attorney General to the Federation. He was also Minister of Justice and Foreign Affairs of Guyana, and he was the longest serving Secretary General of the Commonwealth. He was Chancellor of the University of Guyana, the University of the West Indies, and Warwick University. And during his distinguished career, Trinidad was never one to boast of his accolades. He accepted many of them with quiet distinction. Always professional. In the Commonwealth, we said he was the longest serving. He was there from 1975 to 1990. And during that period, he played a major role in the fight against racism and apartheid in the southern horn of Africa. Nelson Mandela, who spent so many years in prison and later became South Africa's president, said of Sir Trinidad, he is one of those men who have become famous because in their fight for human justice, they have chosen the whole world as their theater. End of quote. He is one of those men who have become famous because in their fight for human justice, they have chosen the whole world as their theater. During his life, of course, he received many honors. But those honors came as a result of his commitment. His firm commitment to the Caribbean. His first commitment to excellence. His commitment to the peoples of the world. The late Lloyd Best used to say that people underestimate the contribution of the Caribbean to the international community. Because many of those who have served internationally with distinction have been humble. They have not talked of their humility, because if you're humble, you don't have to tell anybody. People speak of your humility. And Lloyd Best used to say, when you look at several of the Caribbean, of the international institutions, that the Caribbean could be said to have provided the world with significant public service personnel. People whose commitment to the development of humanity, to the development of a better world, rose beyond their local shores and allowed them to be at peace with themselves as they served the international community. There are many leaders who emerged in the Caribbean and are still emerging, who first and foremost always begin their speeches with I. And it is what I have, what is what I have done, and what is what I will do. Giants like Sridhar Ramphal know that there is no I in we. And his life's work was a commitment to we, the people of the world. To the people of Guyana, to Ramphal's immediate and extended family, we say farewell. And we thank you for the work that you have done around the world. We thank you for having come back to the region at some point and served the peoples of the region. One of his important works at the regional level, quite apart from the chancellorship at universities, had to do with the appeal by then Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, A.N.R. Robinson, for the Caribbean to look at itself. That ended in the production of a book, A Call to Action. Which action, by the way, have not been taken seriously. But we are thankful for the example set by Sridhar Ramphal, a true Caribbean giant who served the peoples of the world. Thank you, Sridhar. Thank you, Guyana. But I want to mention briefly the issue now of religion in Caribbean and Vincentian political culture. The frequency with which this country's Prime Minister, Ralph Gonsalves, utilizes religious phrases, verses, is not original for a politician. Throughout Caribbean history, religion had been inseparable from our politics. We understood that during the period of conquest. The Spanish came to the Caribbean, as some would put it, with the Bible in one hand and the musket or sword in the other. It was always felt that if you could utilize people's beliefs, that it's easier for them to accept what you are saying to them. Even if at times what you are saying and doing to them is decidedly exploitative and horrific, demeaning, dehumanizing. Some people often talk about even the devil quotes scripture, and that is in the scriptures. But even when our Caribbean peoples move towards universal adult suffrage, the right to vote, and got the opportunity to engage in politics so that they could run for political office, religion was always part and parcel of their politics. Indeed, politicians, often in the early days, Caribbean politicians, spoke like religious leaders. The way in which they delivered their political speeches was similar to the way preachers delivered their sermons. The way in which they delivered their political speeches was similar to how religious leaders conducted their services. And there were times when you could not separate the politicians from the religious leaders. But the politicians knew that they were in fact using religion to facilitate the garnering of support, the garnering of the vote, so that they could become the leaders of the respective countries. And when we had the progressive movement in the Caribbean in the 70s, late 60s and 70s, it was commonplace for the progressive elements, as they were referred to smirk at religion because they were convinced that it was non-scientific and that it allowed people to play upon their emotions. And so they were anathema to religion. But when those same progressive elements got into politics, they did exactly what they were condemning. They did exactly what they were condemning. And so just another look pointed out several years ago that our analysis suggested that Panel Campbell, the late Panel Campbell, understood that. And so it was not surprising that he gravitated towards becoming a pointer in the Baptist faith. Then he was a regular visitor to Pastor Daniel's church. And when he became Minister of Ecclesiastical Affairs, not only did he facilitate people of different faiths coming to lead prayers at government functions, that he himself directed government radio station, NBC Radio 705, to cover religious services, not just the odd one on a Sunday, but multiple coverages on a Saturday and a Sunday. And that it was commonplace to find him attending several of those over the weekend. And our analysis suggested then, and we still hold fast to that it was because of Campbell's astute understanding of the role of religion in the political culture of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Because there's a sense in which politicians seem to believe that once you can convince the electorate that you are a believer and that you too can quote scripture much like the preacher, that you're more likely to be perceived by them as somebody they would like to see in political office. This is not to say that we're interfering with individual persons' beliefs. What we are saying is that if we apply our critical thinking skills and we analyze the behavior of some of our politicians and political leaders, we have an understanding of the role that religion has and continues to play in our political culture. And this is all around the Caribbean. All around the Caribbean. And that continues to this day. And we're saying our analysis suggests that the frequency with which Gonzalez quotes scripture may well be with the same objective and based on the same premise, i.e., he has an understanding of the role of religion in our nation's political culture. So that while many things have changed, and while he and others around him talk about a new type of politics, the one feature that has remained old-style politics in all of them is their understanding and use of religion as a critical component of their political culture. So you can have people believe all of the time that we are steeped in faith. But when you analyze their behavior, you may find yourself critically analyzing the relationship between how they and when they use religious terminology and the impact it appears that they may want to have on the electorate. So even most recently, in the midst of the discussion that people have been having about Vybz Kartel being in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you get an explanation that allows you to have a clear understanding of the role of religion in the whole experience. So, we have Eyewitness News dated 21st August 2004 saying, and we quote, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves says the presence in St. Vincent and the Grenadines of Jamaica dancehall artist Vybz Kartel, who was recently released from prison after 13 years in connection with a murder, is a personal act of mercy. It is a personal act of mercy. Alright? So, the mercy concept here may well have been linked to Gonsalves' understanding of the role of political culture, of religion in our political culture. You see, he's quoted here, Gonsalves, as saying, but my impulse was confirmed by his connection to the Cabrals. The Lord works in mysterious ways his wonders to perform. But I begin with the word because I was telling instinctively. I told his lawyer, yes, we'll facilitate because of mercy is in my DNA. It's a noise in the blood. It's an echo in the bone. Gonsalves, according to Eyewitness News, said he learned about mercy from the time I've been suckling at my mother's breast. I learned it in the family. I learned it in school. I learned it in church. I learned it from the elders in the community. It's deep in me. And Eyewitness News goes on. The Prime Minister said he later learned the fullness of mercy when he read in the Bible book of Micah that the Lord required the prophet, quote, to do justly, to have mercy, and to walk humbly with our God, end of quote. And then he cited the parables, quote, and on the day itself of the judgment, there are several questions which come to the fore in terms of inheritance in the kingdom. For I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. You helped me, and I was in prison, and you came unto me. You, that's the impulse, not complicated. End of quote. So you see, even here, in this most recent state, there is the intertwining of religious sentiment and an apparent religious belief that is woven into the political discourse about why Vybz Kartel was here so soon after having been released from prison. And it is unfortunate that so much of the noise that had surrounded his being here at that particular juncture, our journalists and our people in their discussion ignore one of the most critical features of Caribbean politics: the intertwining of religion and a convincing of the electorate that one is in fact deeply religious, so that one can quote scripture willy-nilly, because that has a distinctive impact on a large section of the electorate. And if you go through Caribbean history, you'll see one political leader after another engaging in that type of practice. And just another look at our population. To rewind and reread and listen to again and again some of the writings, some of the political presentations of Gonzalez during the period when he aligned himself with other political institutions, not only in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but across the region. That time when people felt for certain that he was a left-wing politician. And see how many times during that period in his writings and his speeches there were religious references, as you have seen since he came to office in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, since he became Prime Minister. There's a belief within the Caribbean, particularly among political leaders, that the electorate is gullible. That the electorate does not engage in any fanciful critical thinking and critical analysis. That they can be bought. Here's the reason that money is so important. Jamaica, they talk about rum and bully beef politics. Trinidad and Tobago, rum and roti politics. It is the reason that politicians believe that once they want to curry favor with the electorate, you have to show them that you align with some sort of fundamental religious belief. And there's an assumption that once you show that you understand the scriptures and you can quote the scriptures and you can talk in religious terms, that covers everything. Your behavior does not necessarily have to reflect your belief, but you could at least keep saying it and use it often enough that you have them in your support. And the second thing politicians always do in politics is make sure that they have some economic largesse. You could always go in the neighborhood shop and buy drinks for people. Some go to the extent of putting money in packages and putting it under your door closer to the day of election. In other words, Caribbean politicians operate on a premise that the majority of the members who are going to vote are from a class in society amongst whom are the most needy. And of that category of the most indigent, the most poor, the most needy, the here and now is what is important. Give me now and I go vote for you. There's no long perception that they have a long-term thinking pattern. We have said time and again that politicians in the Caribbean, and you see it here, they produce their manifestos as a matter of course. But you, the public, know about them just a week or two before elections. They know very well that the mere fact of producing a manifesto is all that is necessary. They don't have to be giving you time to read it. They don't have to do that. Because they know that the content is not really important. What is important is the pretty book that they give to you to hold. What percentage of the electorate even reads the manifesto? What percentage? And they know that. And the third thing our politicians are adept at, and they know they must do when they want your vote, is to give you t-shirts. Give you t-shirts. Because they have an understanding of people's perceptions of their own needs. So it's a fundamental thing because the belief system is the most important. Remember, in slavery, the seasoning process. The seasoning process was that when you captured people who would become slaves in the Caribbean, you had a period of seasoning. That is a period during which you force people to lose their identity. You put them in a situation where they do not have anything that reminds them of who they really were. You remove from them all their cultural antecedents. And then you infuse into them a new sense of identity. So Omowale may very well become John. And don't even remember that he was once Omowale. His new identity is John. And John is infused with a new socialization. That is the socialization of all that is required behavior-wise, values-wise, belief-wise on the plantation. That's why we were able to find Lloyd Best, Carrie Levitt, and a number of other sociologists talking of George Beckford and others. Talking about plantation society. That the plantation became a society in and of itself. Completely transforming the individuals into persons, in fact, property more than persons, of those who owned and controlled the plantation. Your entire belief system is changed. And you're also given a new religion. But fundamentally, those who organized slavery and kept it going understood that if you could change people's belief patterns, then you have a greater chance of controlling them, of getting them to do everything you want. And that is how they used the concept of black and blackness. So that individuals in societies dominated by African slaves were socialized into believing that by the time, every time you see yourself and you realize you're black, that equated inferiority compared to those of the lighter hue. That is why our society today is still dominated by that socialization. There are countless research documents to show that within this Caribbean we call home, if a black family happens to have a fair-skinned child, that child becomes its doyen. It becomes the favorite. It gets the best of everything. Why? Because they have an understanding of how the society operates. Because the society teaches you that that person is more likely to have a rite of passage in life that is significantly easier than the dark-skinned children. That is still in evidence today across the Caribbean without exception. We do not question the people of the lighter hue because we have not been socialized so to do. And so the understanding of how important belief systems are to your rite of passage and your right of access allows some people to believe that they can utilize religion and religious terminologies, etc., to get the majority of the electorate to believe that they have some divine right to rule. Harry Gary was a master of that. And the progressives at the time laughed at him. He was from the eastern part of Grenada, and he says, the Bible says they would come from the east. The leaders will come from the east. He was from the east. Remember, we read in the Bible, you know, that slaves must be humble and serve their masters. So if you can find as much as possible a link between the use of religious terminology, you may actually get people to believe that you are religious. That's why you have some political leaders who attempt to suggest that God put them here to lead. It didn't happen by accident. But there are often chinks in the armor, and that is why the young man from Union Island wrote after the so-called religious rally of the ULP in 2020, ahead of the elections. When on the tarmac in Annesville, the ULP had this quote-unquote religious type rally. And the people were singing and praying when the Prime Minister arrived. And then that stopped. They stopped them because the Prime Minister came and he needed to speak. And all the worshipping and everything else was brought to a halt because somebody, clearly whom some people believe maybe higher than the God they were praying to, had arrived. And the individual from Union Island wrote letters to the editor saying how shocked, embarrassed, and ashamed he was at what transpired that day. But he applied his critical thinking skills. And he understood then what it meant in real terms for our society. That in the midst of all of the attempt at showcasing religion and the role of religion in the political dynamics of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, he somehow managed to give a higher place to a political leader, apparently, or appeared to be doing that, than the God to whom the people were singing and praying when he arrived. That was that bothered him. And he felt it necessary to write on it. And we're saying that in our analysis over the years, that has been characteristic of Vincentian politics, as it has been of Caribbean politics. And that's why sometimes people say, don't bother to read history, because you may recognize the transformation of people beyond recognition from a time when you never wanted to talk of God, a time when you may never have wanted to talk about your now quote-unquote religious upbringing. So now talking about how frequently you read the Bible. And you remember just another look said that very early in his tenure, we raised a concern. Because people who are religious have a totally different disposition. And when things happen to people, others talk about it, not them. So when someone gets up in public and says, well, you know, or makes it known in public, I was reading the Bible and I saw a drop of blood on the Bible and I can tell you what page it was on, etc., etc., etc. And then goes on to say, and I called my bishop because I searched and there was no orifice on me from which the blood came, or there was evidence of the blood coming from there. And you may recall that just another look says, well, some unfortunate mosquito must have been passing at the time and got squeezed or quashed by the book pages turning. Because it came as a shock to those who have not been following Caribbean politics and who have not taken time to understand the role that religion has played in the politics of the Caribbean. That is still being used today. And so as we get closer to elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we will have more profligate use of those kinds of analogies, because it is in the DNA of Caribbean politicians. And one wonders whether it is seen as a means to an end or whether it is genuine. Judge not, lest ye be judged by the same yardstick that you use. Do not judge, but analyze. Apply your critical thinking skills each and every day. And we have an understanding of just what happens in our society and how religion has been utilized and crafted time and time again to facilitate the political ambitions of many in our society. But we want to tell you too that an important feature of Vincentian and Caribbean politics is megalomania. Megalomania. What is megalomania? The Cambridge Dictionary says megalomania is an unnaturally strong wish for power and control. An unnaturally strong wish for power and control. It may also mean the belief that one individual or the individual plagued by megalomania is more important and more powerful than he or she really is. Power and control. Power and control. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary says that megalomania is a delusional mental illness. A delusional mental illness marked by feelings of personal omnipotence and grandeur. A sense that one is all powerful. All power resides with you. Only you can make all decisions. Only you can determine what happens. The Oxford Learners Dictionaries define megalomania as a strong feeling that an individual wants to have more and more power. More and more power. Yeah. And so today, just another look asks, are we, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and indeed in the politics of the Caribbean, plagued by a legacy of megalomania amongst our politicians? Do they want to present themselves? They're so consumed with power and control that they let you know I is more important than we. I is more important than we. So when we have leaders that can only speak about themselves and what they put in place, they are actually placing themselves over and above the we. The we. They are placing themselves as the source of power and control in the society. But there are chinks in the armor. We have quoted to you several times the comments referred to as having come from the Prime Minister of this country in his capacity as leader of the party. And speaking at a function, he was quoted as saying, "I, the youngest head, I made the plan. I produced the plan. I write a book on it. And everybody knows it. And they're using that book to study the plan." So at the end of the day, you sat there listening and saying, well, at what point do we get others involved? And we wrote some time back, or mentioned some time back in one of our programs, that what we choose to describe as perhaps a fit of Trumpism. Gonzales the Elder seeks political relevance. And we said that this is expressed in his insistence that he is the youngest head. And we asked, what exactly is this intended to mean for the younger members of his party, who themselves may have grown weary of him and his ideas. And we said in that program, now more than ever, and long after he has been dead, Eduardo Lynch's characterization of the ULP as composed of one encyclopedia and several exercise books bears relevance. We said then that more than 2 decades after becoming Prime Minister, Gonzales the Elder can muster nothing new for the party, and even less so for the nation. That is our reality. It is what we are confronted with. So we find ourselves in a quandary where we are forced to ask ourselves, are we in a state where we can refer to the existence and or persistence of megalomania, people consumed with power, and people who at the end of the day are interested and insisted that they are the ones to do everything, that they alone can handle everything. And so we find ourselves being decidedly bothered when we recognize the insistence that in the politics of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there's more I than we. That the individual leader is perceived to be the be-all and end-all of our politics, of our governance, of our education. And the minions that follow seem to have a chant, an inaudible chant. Yes, Papa. Go long, Papa. You're right, Papa. It's all about you, Papa. That's where we are. And that's a challenge that we find in ourselves. That we create successions of leaders who, while on the campaign trail talk so much about what we can do, once in office, begin to talk about what I have done. And I ain't finished yet. I have plenty more work to do, so I ain't going nowhere. That is what we have for leadership. And so it is important for the average Vincentian to ask the question, you know, we seem to have created the position of Deputy Prime Minister. But when you look at the cabinets that have been established since then, who have been selected or identified as the Deputy Prime Minister? Not any of the younger members of the party. Not any of them. So we've had Louis Straker on the one hand. And then we have Montgomery Daniel. And from our analysis, we conclude that there may well be a fear that if you give any of those younger ones who may be aspiring to leadership of the party and of the country, they may decide to take actions while the cat's away. Actions that may in fact not be what Papa wants. There may well be that fear. So you put as a Deputy Prime Minister somebody who is not going to take any action without first consulting you, regardless of how far away you are from the country. We're making no independent decision. And we're not going to get the rest of the cabinet to make a decision because you're not here. So how on the one hand, we are constantly being told that we are grooming others for leadership. But we're making sure we don't give them a chance to hold on to the reins of power. So we have to have an understanding of what is happening in our political reality. And how destructive politics on the part of the ruling regime hinders the average Vincentian from applying his or her critical thinking skills to analyze the reality that confronts us on a daily basis. And you sit and you watch the parliamentarians all singing from the same song sheet. And all appearing to say, yes, Papa, that is true. Yes, Papa, that is true. And applaud and applaud and applaud. They better applaud in Parliament because ain't nobody applauding outside of Parliament. And that is part of our reality. So we find ourselves caught up in a bind where for more than a week people are trying to keep alive a discussion on Vybz Kartel in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That is pure destructive politics. It makes no sense. It's a done deal. It's done. It happened. It's what lessons you take from it. But to take lessons from it, you must analyze it properly. So that when you're starting a discourse, it makes sense. Rather than the flippity flopping of people talking top of head without understanding the dynamics of what it means in terms of governance in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We must stop trivializing these issues and call them up for what they are: distractive politics. Distractive politics. What is the focus? Where is the ball? What is the ball? What is our focus? Is it the genuine development of Vincentian society? Or is it the join the line and wine type of analyses that leads us nowhere at the end of the day? And we move on to the next topic. Are we making linkages in terms of political behavior in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And that is analysis of all of our politicians and all of what they are saying and all of what they are doing and all about how they are living their lives. Are they good examples? Are they people who deserve to be in leadership? And have we been transformed into a Vincentian electorate that is committed to living on handouts? So that we can be treated willy-nilly. And not understand what is happening. Where were we when people were asking for years, what will the airport cost? You don't start building a house without knowing what it costs. Because when you go to the bank asks you for your plans and your capacity to pay back the loan that you're going to take. So we build an international airport, start building an international airport, and for 2 consecutive years, the opposition is asking in Parliament, what will it cost? What will it cost? And we could not be told until we well into progress. And then the figures keep changing. And then we are told that you take a little from here and you put it over there. You take a little from over there and you put it over there. That's planning. That's the plan that people are supposed to be studying, that's written in some book someplace. Why would people want to study that? It's not planning, it's VAPs. But all you're concerned is that it got done. So why are you calling us to account? It got done. Be satisfied that it is done. And similarly, we have other projects where you really, at the end of the day, not quite sure what is happening. So why are we surprised? Why are we surprised about the issue with the decision regarding who gets to build the new hospital? Why are we surprised that it goes to a Taiwanese company? Why are we surprised at the terms and conditions of the loan repayment. Why are we surprised? Is that not how things have been done for the last 20 odd years? Why are we surprised that the project never went out to tender? Why are we surprised? It happened with the bridge over troubled water. And the way in which that was dealt with left us no doubt that if need be, it will be done again. Why are we surprised? That we chose not to take the World Bank advice? Because who? Who's the World Bank? Who's the World Bank? We better than them. We know better than them. Because the I is the ultimate determiner of how we do things at a governmental level in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's not the we, it is the I. So we borrow the money from Taiwan to pay a company from Taiwan to build the hospital. We borrow 125 million from Taiwan and then turn around and give the contract to build the hospital that we borrow the money for to a Taiwanese company. Hey, what else is new, people? What else is new? Remember not too long ago, when the NDP spoke about supporting the One China policy and that they will consider looking at China, the criticism that was leveled by the ruling Unity Labour Party government was against going to China. But there was also some comments made about if they want to go to somebody else, they have to pay back all the money that we owe Taiwan. But we know that if you're refinancing with another institution, clearly you have to make arrangements to pay the institution that you're leaving. That's normal practice. So that's not a big political issue. But you could make it into a big political issue when you come and say the extent to which we are indebted to Taiwan will be a millstone around the neck of any new government that wants to break ties with Taiwan. What is that? Scare tactics? The opposition supposed to run and hide in a corner and get scared. The electorate supposed to get totally scared. Oh my God, how are we going to pay back this money? Why are we concerned about that nonsense? Because even if you stay in power, ad infinitum, you still have to pay back that money. The country still has to pay back that money. Unless you have some special arrangements where we get all the loans written off. Venezuela wrote off our debt to them for Petrocaribe and what have you. So maybe you alone can get Taiwan to write off that debt. Because it does not make sense it is not even logical to suggest that if a government after you is not following your policy with regard to Taiwan, that they have to pay back Taiwan. The country have to pay back Taiwan. Yes, countries do that every day. Every day. And you know very well it is possible for another country to say, we will buy off your debt. China has been doing that all through South America, all through Africa, all through Central America. China has been buying people debt. Look at the quantity of US bonds that China purchases. You see, when you're speaking to the Vincentian electorate, you must bring to them the whole truth. As you like to say, the fulsome truth. Not part of it. So on the one hand, you're telling us how indebted we are to Taiwan. And suggesting to the electorate, if you don't stay with us, and the fellas on the other side get in charge and they go to China, all you still have to pay back the debt to Taiwan. Well, if your party stays in power, they still have to pay back the debt. But it's the nonsense politics and the belief that once you explain something, that is the only possible explanation that we should accept. Not so, sir. Not so. You're not the only person that went to school. Not the only person that went to school. So that we have to have an understanding of the way in which politics is practiced in this country to leave the country bitterly divided. And to continue to put people in positions who are first and foremost loyal to the ruling regime. So that increasingly it appears to anyone wishing to apply their critical thinking skills that the priority consideration for appointments to top positions begins with loyalty to the party. And perhaps secondarily or thirdly, merit. Merit. So if we look at the Ministry of National Security, for example, we started off with Vincent Beach. Somebody who, in the rough and tumble of Vincentian politics, we were told at one point, is a coconut bat. Was that a suggestion that he was dunce? Was that a suggestion? It's a coconut bat. Could only use a screwdriver. But we put him in charge of national security. Then after Vincent, the Prime Minister took on the portfolio of national security. What is his track record as Minister of National Security? What is his performance record as Minister of National Security? You be the judge. We keep setting new national records for the number of murders committed in a single year. And we get international ranking for that. But last year we were what? Second or third in the Caribbean? In terms of number of murders committed per 100,000 of people, of a population. What is his performance record as Minister of National Security? In a normal society, one would have imagined that the Minister of National Security would have been fired But you can't fire yourself. Or can you? Right? So at the end of the day, we say, nah, don't use any harsh criteria there. He's the Prime Minister, he's the Commander-in-Chief, etc., etc. He's head of national security as one of his portfolios. But we're not going to hold that against him. But what is the criteria for becoming head of national security? We have watched that in 20 years we have had several commissioners of police. And one of them end up making arrangements to go to a non-existent conference in Africa, for which he made at least 2 payments by Western Union. This is a commissioner of police. This is head of your security unit. By Western Union. He sent in money to pay to attend a conference, which clearly, if the conference did exist, would have required payment by the governmental authorities. They make at least 2 payments by Western Union. And then suddenly it dawns on you that, wait a minute, is something wrong here? Because you're paying the money by Western Union to a lady whose name started with Precious. Precious something. Precious. The only people that have names that start like that, the country that you don't know, maybe people who you don't want to associate yourself with. So Madam Precious get 2 payments of money from our commissioner of police from the coffers of the institution. Did he pay it back? We don't even know. Because the Minister of National Security and tell us whether or not he was made to pay it back. We have elections. And the Commissioner of Police was on leave. Normal societies, when there are national elections, you need all of your securities to come away from leave. We had our Commissioner of Police, head of the police service, on leave during an election. Then he ends his tenure as Commissioner of Police. And then we have the Airport Authority employing him as head of security. So what were the criteria again? And of the persons who applied for that job, he was certainly not the most qualified. You should make public the list of applicants and then make public the short list of applicants so that they could understand how the decision was made in the end to have put him in charge. And then suddenly, he's terminated as head of airport security. That is how the country is being run. You did not have to explain why you bypassed the tenders board. Because you are in charge. And you are the youngest head. And you write the plan. Because there's a belief that when we look at the political culture of the Caribbean, we thrive on political patronage. That's why you see all these lines when ministers have clinic. Ministers are not medical practitioners. Why they have clinic? It is an opportunity to have people come one-on-one, talk to them, tell them what level of support they have, etc., etc., because they're looking for work or they're looking for some money. we remind our listeners that were it not for the death, painful, horrific death of the young man, the young boy, didn't get assistance to go to Trinidad for the kind of diagnostics he needed, we would not have known that provision of assistance for people with health problems could come from the National Lottery. We never knew that. People on the street may have heard of people getting assistance, but they didn't know it was a policy. And it is that little boy's death that caused the nation to know finally that the lottery is not for sport and culture only, but that we also deal with education, and we deal with health, and we deal with quote-unquote other cases. But we have no idea how these causes are allocated funding from the lottery. How much of the lottery's annual cake is used for sport, for culture, for education, for medical, and other causes? How much? What is the division? And what is the level of accountability? Where do we go to get that information? Where do we get access to that information? So when the people in Carnival, for example, ask for more, what is the critical, or what are the critical factors at play when the lottery determines what proportion they will be given? Or is it that you take up the phone and call the Minister of Finance or the Prime Minister or both and you get a figure? How is it done? Or why are we afraid as an institution and a political party that once touted the importance of fostering a consultative democracy, or being a promoter of transparency and accountability? Why are we afraid to publish those figures? Why? What prevents us from trusting the Vincentian electorate enough to be able to have an open book style of government? Ain't your money. It's not your money. Like the advertisement which J.C. Wentworth says, it's your money. It's your money, the people of the country. Get it when you need it. That's what the ad says. It's your money. Get it when you need it. But with the national cake and several of our institutions, we seem to cherry pick which institutions we'll make transparent and which we will not. So people will discuss and talk and ramble about this latest piece of evidence of leadership Vincentian style. You borrow money to build a hospital, and then from the same country that lend you the money, you award a contract without going to tender. You know, when we were discussing the bridge over troubled water in the early days of ULP government, we reminded ourselves as to why there's a tenders board. It is essentially to protect public officials from themselves. We knew the response, and some people accepted, and Julian Francis said, It was an emergency. I needed it done right away, and the tenders board had too much red tape. Well, change the rules for the operation of the tenders board and make them public. And engage the public in determining whether or not there are circumstances which would warrant a fast tracking of the decision making process, but at the same time safeguard against any hint of corruption. That's all you need to do. Not necessarily going on public and say, if it happened, I will do it again. If the regulations are so changed as to facilitate fast tracking where deemed necessary by a process that is well established, then we could cut short the red tape. But we don't disrespect the institution that we have created or we put in place or we have in place, and we leave them in place to come later on and do something similar with a much larger project. With a much larger project. You see, friends, we have, as a nation, to pay closer attention to our nation. There's a reason that people talk about going to school. But certification is not education. School attendance in and of itself does not mean that we have an educated public. We have to work at that. And an educated public continue to ask questions. They want to know what is happening in the country, how decisions are being made, and the outcome, the implications of those decisions. They want to know that when projects are undertaken, that they can be accounted for in all aspects. So while we were telling the nation that we had one of the best teaching hospitals, that's why we get so many offshore medical schools coming to our country. One expanded so rapidly that it went over where Teachers College used to be. And just as rapidly as they went there and fixed up the place and make it look nice and so on, they left our shores. We don't have any explanation as to why they left. We were told why they came. We had one of the best teaching hospitals. But if you listen to parliamentary debates, and that is one of the best hospitals, then we're in trouble. Because we're now justifying the need for a new hospital because of the problems with the existing one that we told the nation was one of the best teaching hospitals in the region. So exactly where do we find truth? Where do we find truth? That is so difficult to find in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as it now stands. And the thing is that you have a whole choir that applauds what appears to be a wishy-washy system of governance that is best described by the late Eduardo Lynch. One encyclopedia. And a whole set of exercise books. It doesn't make sense for us to be treated to the repetitive statements about how many books the Prime Minister has written. What has been the benefit to the nation of those books? What has been the benefit to even his own cabinet of those books? Whatever plan he says and he claims ownership for, that he says universities are studying. How many Vincentians are privy to that plan? The Poverty Assessment Report of 2018 has still not been made public, and we are in 2024. There was an issue in 2020 leading up to the elections. And we were given a mumbo-jumbo type of half-baked explanation that the survey was improperly done. We never had that problem before. Suddenly, after all the poverty assessment surveys that we've undertaken in the past, and which were used by then opposition to condemn the ruling regime at the time, suddenly this one can't be released because the methodology, the same methodology that has been used time and time again, is faulty. The ruling regime has defined it as faulty. It will be redone, we are told. But we're now in 2024. How far have we gone with what is being redone? How far? Will we get it before elections in 2025? Will we? The issue of trust, of confidence in the administration that governs this country cannot be addressed by what we see and hear and read from the Unity Labour Party administration, from the government of today. And so we've had the latest twisting around of some members' portfolios. But all you've done is throw some cold water on what already exists. No fundamental changes. So that we are where we are today, as confused as we have ever been. And people are looking for light at the end of the tunnel. There is no I in we. And there certainly ain't no we in I. That's where we are, you know. We're at a stage where I runs the country. Where I have the youngest head. Where I make the plan. And where my plans are being studied by universities. So you all could say what all you want. My plan is what I am implementing, and the universities are using it. I don't have to tell you which universities because perhaps I may not know myself. But universities studying it. What they're studying it for, we don't really know. Will they report back? And if they do, to whom? We don't really know. What is not to be known is that I wrote it. And I am implementing it because I am the youngest head. So we come to a stage in our society where we have to accept Aymanist leadership and the concept of a consultative democracy will remain forever embedded in promissory notes that are called manifestos. The concept of a civil society and a contract with civil society, well, whoever signed that never put in place any mechanism for evaluating its implementation. So it's just there, gathering dust. Some may not even be able to find their copies. and some who attended the big show in Methodist Church Hall when that contract was ostensibly read out in parts, its viability enunciated by those who wrote it. And all of that took place in 2001. And yet, nobody today can say what parts of that contract with civil society have been implemented and what are the outcomes. Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look. Heard on Nice Radio, 6 p.m. on Saturdays, 9 p.m. on Sundays. But now also accessible on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph.